Jack Brennan never thought he would kiss a stranger. Not once in his 38 years had he imagined pressing his lips against a woman he did not know. But that February night in Boston changed everything. She was dying in the back seat of his Lincoln Town car. Her lips had turned purple. Her eyes rolled back. Her fingers clawed desperately at her purse, searching for something she could not find. He had seconds. No EpiPen, no ambulance that could arrive in time. The dispatcher said 8 minutes. She did not have 8 minutes, so Jack did the only thing his firefighter training had taught him a decade ago. He breathed life into her lungs, pressed his palms against her chest, and refused to let her go. The woman gasping beneath him was Emma Whitmore, the 32-year-old heiress to a $4.2 billion empire. The night had started like any other shift for Jack. He arrived at the dispatch office at 7 in the evening, checked out his assigned vehicle, and reviewed his schedule for the night. 3 pickups. The first 2 were routine business executives heading to the airport, quiet passengers who barely acknowledged his existence. That was how Jack preferred it. Silence made the hours pass faster. Silence kept him from thinking too much about the life he had lost and the one he was still trying to rebuild. His final pickup of the night was at the Four Seasons Hotel, where a charity gala was wrapping up. Jack pulled the Lincoln to the entrance at exactly 11:15, just as a woman in an emerald evening gown emerged from the revolving doors. Emma Whitmore climbed into the back seat looking utterly exhausted. Her designer dress was wrinkled. Her makeup had begun to fade. She gave him an address in Beacon Hill and then turned to stare out the window, her expression distant and unreachable. 20 minutes into the drive, Emma spoke for the first time. She asked him to stop at a coffee cart she spotted near the edge of Beacon Hill. A young barista was working the late shift, steam rising from the espresso machine into the cold February air. Emma wanted something warm, she said. Something to shake off the exhaustion of 3 hours of forced smiles and polite conversation with people who only wanted her money. Jack pulled over and waited while she purchased a latte. He watched through the rearview mirror as she returned to the car, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup, taking a long sip. For a moment, she looked almost peaceful. Then her face changed. The cup fell from her hands. Hot liquid splashed across the leather seats. Her fingers flew to her throat as her eyes went wide with panic. She was gasping, choking, her breath coming in short, desperate wheezes that grew weaker with each passing second. Jack recognized the symptoms immediately. He had seen anaphylaxis twice during his years as a firefighter. Both times, someone had been ready with an EpiPen. This time, there was nothing but a woman dying in his back seat and the cold February night pressing in from all sides. He slammed the car into park and threw open the back door. His hand searched her purse with frantic urgency, tossing aside a wallet, keys, lipstick, searching for the EpiPen that had to be there. But it was not there. Emma had forgotten it in her rush to leave the gala. She had been so tired, so eager to escape the endless parade of handshakes and hollow compliments, that she had left behind the one thing that could save her life. Jack dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional as she promised an ambulance would arrive in 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Jack looked at Emma's purple lips and bulging eyes. In 8 minutes, she would be dead. He made his decision without hesitation. He tilted her head back, cleared her airway, and pressed his mouth against hers. Not a kiss, a lifeline. He breathed into her lungs when her own lungs could not draw a breath. He compressed her chest when her heart began to falter. For 4 minutes that felt like 4 hours, Jack Brennan fought death in the back of a Lincoln Town car, while sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. When the paramedics finally arrived, Emma was still breathing. Her pulse was weak but present. Her lips had begun to regain their color. The EMTs loaded her onto a stretcher and into the ambulance, working with the efficient urgency of people who saved lives for a living. Jack stood on the sidewalk watching the red lights disappear into the night. His hands were shaking. His shirt was soaked with sweat. And somewhere deep inside him, something had shifted that he could not yet name. Jack followed the ambulance to Massachusetts General Hospital. He told himself he just wanted to make sure she survived. He told himself it was simple human decency, the same impulse that would make anyone check on a stranger they had helped. But deep down, he knew there was something more. Something about the way she had looked at him in those final seconds before the paramedics arrived. Gratitude mixed with confusion, mixed with something he could not identify. He sat in the waiting room for 3 hours. The plastic chair was uncomfortable. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with a sound that burrowed into his skull. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Mrs. Doyle, the elderly neighbor who watched Sophie when Jack worked the night shift. She wanted to know if everything was okay. She wanted to know when he was coming home. Jack texted back that he would be there soon, but the hours kept slipping away. Then a message came from Sophie herself. His 7-year-old daughter had somehow convinced Mrs. Doyle to let her stay up past midnight. The message included a photograph of a crayon drawing. 2 stick figures standing in front of a small house. A tall figure with brown hair and a small figure with yellow pigtails. Father and daughter. The family they had become after Sarah died 4 years ago in a car accident that had shattered Jack's world and rebuilt it into something smaller and more fragile. Jack stared at that drawing for a long time. His heart ached with the familiar pull between his daughter who needed him and the stranger whose life he had just saved. He should leave. He had done his part. Whatever happened next was not his responsibility. Emma Whitmore had an army of people to take care of her. He was gathering his jacket to leave when the doors burst open. A team of lawyers, assistants, and bodyguards flooded into the waiting room. Their expensive suits and urgent whispers filled the sterile space with an energy that did not belong. Jack watched them rush toward the private wing of the hospital. He had not fully realized who he had saved until that moment. The Whitmore name was everywhere in Boston. Real estate developments that transformed entire neighborhoods, hotels that hosted presidents and celebrities, charitable foundations that funded hospitals and schools. Emma Whitmore was not just wealthy, she was royalty in a city that did not believe in kings. A woman in her mid-40s broke away from the group and approached him. She introduced herself as Margaret Lawson, Emma's chief of staff. She looked at Jack with an expression that mixed gratitude with suspicion. Maggie explained that the family appreciated his assistance. She asked if he would be willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement. The document she produced was thick with legal language. They thought he might sell his story to the tabloids. They saw him not as a person who had done the right thing, but as a potential threat to be neutralized. Jack pushed the papers away and stood up. His voice was quiet but firm. He told Maggie that he did not save Emma for money or recognition. He saved her because she was dying and he knew how to help. He needed nothing from the Whitmore family. He wanted nothing from them. He turned to leave, and that was when he heard it. A weak voice calling from somewhere down the corridor. Emma had woken up. She had heard his words through the open door of her private room, and she was asking Maggie to bring him to her. The hospital room was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Private and spacious, more like a luxury hotel suite than a medical facility. Flowers had already begun arriving from well-wishers across the city, filling every surface with color and fragrance. But Jack barely noticed the extravagance. His attention was fixed on the woman lying in the bed. Emma looked smaller than she had seemed in the back of his car. Her dark brown hair spread across the white pillow like a halo. Her green eyes, though tired and shadowed, held a sharpness that surprised him. She was studying him with the same intensity he was studying her, as if trying to understand how this stranger had appeared in her life at the exact moment she needed him most. She thanked him, but not in the way Jack expected. There were no promises of extravagant rewards, no offers of money or gifts or favors. She simply said the words and meant them. "Thank you for saving my life." They talked until 3 in the morning. Jack did not know how it happened. He was not a man who shared easily. Years of grief had taught him to keep his walls high and his emotions guarded. But something about Emma drew the words out of him. He told her about Sarah, about the car accident that had taken her 4 years ago, about the way his world had collapsed in a single phone call, how he had gone from husband and father to widower and single parent in the space of a heartbeat. He told her about leaving the fire department because the risks felt different when a little girl was waiting at home. He told her about the long nights driving strangers through the city, about the silence and the solitude and the way he had learned to be both mother and father to a child who still asked why mommy never came home. Emma listened without interruption. Her eyes never left his face. When he finished, she shared her own story. Her father had died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden and brutal and completely unexpected. He had been the only person in the world who saw her as more than a bank account. Everyone else wanted something. Business partners wanted deals. Socialites wanted connections. Suitors wanted access to her fortune. But her father had simply loved her. Since his death, she had eaten every dinner alone. Jack looked at this woman who owned more than he could ever imagine. Penthouse apartments. Private jets. Influence that shaped entire industries. And yet, she was just as lonely as he was. Maybe more so. At least he had Sophie. The clock on the wall showed 4:15. Jack realized with a start that he needed to leave. Sophie would be waking up for school in a few hours. He stood and thanked Emma for the conversation. It had meant more than he knew how to express. He headed for the door. Her voice stopped him at the threshold. She asked what she could do to repay him, what he needed, what he wanted. Jack paused with his hand on the door handle. He told her he needed nothing. But if she truly wanted to give something, she could come visit his daughter sometime and tell her about flowers. Sophie loved hearing stories from new people. She had a particular fascination with lilies. Emma smiled for the first time since they had met. It transformed her face, softening the sharp edges of exhaustion and grief. She told him that her mother had loved lilies too. They had been her favorite flower. Jack left the hospital as the first gray light of dawn began to creep over Boston. Behind him, Emma Whitmore lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she had met someone who wanted nothing from her, and she did not know what to do with that feeling. 3 days passed. Jack returned to his normal routine, driving his shifts and caring for Sophie, and trying to convince himself that his encounter with Emma Whitmore had been an anomaly, a strange detour in an otherwise ordinary life. Something to tell Sophie about when she was older. A story and nothing more. Then the envelope arrived. It was waiting for him at the dispatch office. Inside was a thick, cream-colored invitation. Sophie was cordially invited to visit the Boston Botanical Garden that Sunday. Private tour. All expenses covered. The card was signed with 2 elegant letters. E. W. Jack's first instinct was to throw it away. This was not his world. Private tours and botanical gardens belonged to people who did not count their dollars at the grocery store. He did not want Sophie growing accustomed to things they could never afford. But Sophie found the invitation before he could make it disappear. Her eyes went wide with wonder. She asked if there would be lilies there. Real ones, growing from the ground. She had only ever seen them in pictures in library books. Jack could not say no to that face. Her mother's face, looking up at him with hope and excitement, he agreed to one visit. Just one. A polite thank you, and nothing more. After Sunday, they would return to their normal life. Sunday arrived cold but bright. Jack dressed Sophie in her warmest coat, the purple one with the missing button that he kept meaning to replace. They took the bus to the garden because Jack could not afford a taxi and refused to use his work car for personal errands. Sophie pressed her nose against the window the entire ride, watching the city pass by with the endless fascination of a child who found wonder in ordinary things. Emma was waiting at the entrance. She looked different than she had in the hospital. Healthy and whole, her color returned, her eyes bright. She wore simple clothes that probably cost more than Jack's monthly rent but looked effortlessly casual. Jeans and a cream-colored sweater, a small pendant around her neck that caught the winter sunlight. No bodyguards, no assistants, just a woman standing alone, looking almost nervous. Sophie hid behind Jack's legs when they approached, suddenly shy. But Emma did something that surprised him. Instead of greeting Jack first, she knelt down to Sophie's eye level. She asked what Sophie liked to draw, not what she wanted to be when she grew up. She asked about the thing that mattered most to a 7-year-old girl. Sophie warmed up quickly after that. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket, a drawing she had made the night before. It showed her family. 2 stick figures standing in front of a small house with a red door. Father and daughter. No mother. No siblings. Just the 2 of them against the world. Emma studied that drawing for a long moment. Her eyes glistened, but she did not cry. Jack watched her face and realized that she understood. She knew exactly what it meant to draw a family portrait with someone missing. She had probably drawn similar pictures after her father died. They walked through the garden together, the 3 of them, past orchids and ferns and plants with names Jack could not pronounce. Emma pointed out different species to Sophie, explaining where they came from, how they survived in different climates, what they needed to grow. She never talked down to the child. She spoke to her like an equal, like someone whose curiosity and questions deserved genuine answers and respect. At the lily exhibit, Sophie pressed her nose against the greenhouse glass. White petals unfurled in the warm, humid air, stamens dusted with yellow pollen, leaves so green they almost glowed. Sophie turned to Emma with shining eyes and made a solemn promise. She would draw her a lily, the most beautiful lily anyone had ever seen. Emma accepted the offer with a gravity that touched Jack deeply. She did not dismiss it as childish. She did not offer to buy Sophie professional art supplies or enroll her in expensive classes. She simply said she would treasure it forever. As they walked back toward the entrance, something happened that Jack did not expect. Sophie reached out and slipped her small hand into Emma's. It was such a natural gesture that Jack almost missed it. His daughter, who had grown cautious around strangers since her mother's death, had decided to trust this woman she barely knew. Emma looked at Jack with a question in her eyes. She wanted to know if this could happen again. Jack did not answer. He was not sure he knew what to say. Monday morning shattered the fragile peace of the weekend. A photograph appeared on the Boston Society pages, splashed across websites and social media feeds throughout the city. Emma Whitmore at the Botanical Garden with an unknown man and child. The headline speculated wildly about a secret romance. The comments section filled with crude assumptions, vicious gossip, and invasive questions about the identity of the mysterious driver. By noon, Jack had been summoned to his supervisor's office. The company provided drivers for wealthy clients who valued discretion above all else. Having one of their employees splashed across the tabloids, linked romantically to a billionaire heiress, was completely unacceptable. Jack was suspended indefinitely. No pay, no benefits, no explanation beyond the obvious. He walked out of the building with his hands in his pockets and his stomach tied in knots. Sophie's tutoring cost $200 a month. Their rent was due in 2 weeks. His savings account held enough to last maybe 6 weeks if he was careful. After that, he did not know what they would do. His phone rang as he stood on the sidewalk trying to process what had just happened. Emma's name appeared on the screen. He answered despite knowing he probably should not. Her voice was shaking when she spoke. She apologized over and over, the words tumbling out in a rush of guilt and distress. She had not known anyone was watching. She never meant for any of this to happen. She would fix it. She would make it right. She would do whatever it took to undo the damage her presence had caused. Jack listened in silence until she finished. Then he told her the truth, his voice flat and exhausted. He did not blame her. But she needed to understand that they lived in different worlds. Her mistakes made headlines and generated gossip. His mistakes made him unemployed and potentially homeless. Emma offered him a job immediately. Personal driver, working directly for her, at double his current salary with full benefits. He could set his own hours around Sophie's schedule. He would never have to worry about money again. Jack refused before she finished speaking. He told her he was not a charity case. He had not earned that position and would not accept it. More importantly, he would not have Sophie growing up thinking her father had sold himself to a wealthy woman in exchange for comfort and security. There was a long pause on the phone line. Jack braced himself for anger. He expected her to hang up, offended by his pride, wounded by his rejection of her generosity. Instead, Emma offered something different. She would speak to his former employer, not to beg or threaten or throw her weight around. She would simply explain what happened that night, how Jack saved her life, how he had been punished for an act of extraordinary kindness. She would make them understand that he deserved his job back, not as a favor to her, but as simple justice. She asked for nothing in return. She expected nothing in return. She simply wanted to correct an injustice that her presence in his life had caused. Jack did not know how to respond. In his experience, people with power used it to take things from others. They did not use it to give without expecting something back. He told her he would think about it. Then he ended the call and sat alone in his apartment, staring at the wall, wondering what Emma Whitmore truly wanted from him and whether he would ever understand. While Jack struggled with the consequences of a photograph, Emma fought a battle of her own. Her uncle Richard had been waiting for an opportunity exactly like this one. Since her father's death, Richard had been maneuvering to take control of Whitmore Enterprises. The photograph gave him the ammunition he needed. Richard called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. He stood before them with printed copies of the tabloid article. His argument was simple and devastating. Emma was emotionally unstable. She had nearly died from her own carelessness, and now she was publicly consorting with a working-class driver and his child. The company needed steady leadership. Richard proposed installing himself as interim CEO. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Some had known Emma since she was a child. They remembered her father and his vision for the company. They remembered his unwavering faith in his daughter's abilities, but others were newer, brought onto the board by Richard over the past 2 years. They owed their positions to him. Their loyalties lay with the man who had given them power, not the woman who had inherited it. Emma listened to her uncle's speech without interruption. Her face remained calm even as fury burned in her chest. When Richard finished and turned to her with a triumphant smile, she rose to address the room. She told them the truth in measured tones. Yes, she had nearly died. A man had saved her life at great personal cost. He had lost his job because of her. He had faced public humiliation because of her. And her uncle's response to this tragedy was to weaponize it against her. She looked directly at Richard. She asked him what he had been doing while she was dying in the back of that car. Had he called to check on her condition? Had he visited her in the hospital? Or had he been here in this very building, calculating how to turn her misfortune into his opportunity? The room fell silent. Several board members looked away, unable to meet her gaze. The vote was close, 6-5. Emma kept her position, but the victory felt hollow. As Richard prepared to leave, he paused beside her chair. His voice was low. He told her this was just the beginning. That evening, Jack received a phone call from his former employer. His suspension had been lifted. He could return to work the following Monday. Emma had made that call. She had used her influence not to give him an unearned gift, but to restore something that had been unfairly taken. He returned to work, but nothing was the same. His co-workers whispered behind his back. They made assumptions about what he had done to attract a billionaire's attention. None of them knew the real story. None of them cared to ask. At home that evening, Sophie asked about Emma. She wanted to know when the nice lady from the garden would come visit again. Jack had no answer to give her. He did not know if he would ever see Emma Whitmore again. Part of him hoped he would not. Life had been simpler before she entered it. Lonelier, perhaps, but simpler. and sometimes simple was all a person could handle. 2 weeks of silence followed. Jack drove his routes, picked up his passengers, counted his tips, and returned home each night to Sophie. Emma was consumed by the ongoing war with her uncle, fighting daily battles to maintain control of the company her father had built. They existed in parallel, their lives touching only in memory. Then one rainy night, everything changed again. Jack finished his shift at 11 and drove home through streets slick with water. Streetlights reflected off the wet pavement like scattered jewels. When he turned onto his block, he noticed a car parked in front of his building. A sleek black sedan that did not belong in this neighborhood. His heart tightened with a mixture of fear and anticipation as he recognized it. Emma stepped out as he approached. She wore no makeup. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Her expensive clothes were rumpled as if she had been wearing them for days. She looked nothing like the composed heiress the world saw in photographs and press releases. She looked like someone who had reached the end of her rope. She told him she did not know where else to go. Everyone in her life wanted something from her. Everyone had an agenda. He was the only person she trusted. The only one who had never asked for anything. Jack stood in the rain, water dripping from his hair, running down his face. Every sensible instinct told him to send her away. She was trouble. She was complication. She was everything he did not need in his carefully constructed life. Her presence brought chaos and scandal and photographers lurking in shadows. But she was also alone. Truly, desperately alone. And Jack knew what alone felt like. He opened his door and told her he had tea if she wanted it. They sat in his small kitchen while rain streaked the windows and the radiator clanked and hissed in the corner. Jack made chamomile tea in mismatched mugs, the only kind he kept in the apartment because it helped Sophie sleep on difficult nights. They sat across from each other at the tiny table where he and Sophie ate their meals, and Emma began to talk. She told him about her ex-fiancé, Christopher. They had been engaged for almost a year before Emma discovered the truth. Christopher had been feeding information to Richard the entire time. Their romance had been a calculated move in a corporate chess game Emma had not even known she was playing. The man she had loved, the man she had planned to marry, had seen her only as a means to gain access to her fortune. She told him about her father. How he had been the only person who made her feel safe. How she had discovered after his death just how isolated she truly was. People approached her with smiles and flattery, but everyone wanted something. Favors, money, influence, connections. She could not remember the last time someone had been kind to her without calculating what they might gain. Jack poured her more tea and sat back in his chair. He told her that he wanted nothing from her, and to be honest, she had nothing he needed. His life was small, but it was his. Sophie was healthy. They had a roof over their heads. What more could a man reasonably ask for? Emma laughed. The sound surprised them both. It was the first time she had laughed genuinely in months. She told him that was probably the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her. Their moment was interrupted by a small sound from the hallway. Sophie appeared in the doorway in her pajamas. When she saw Emma sitting at their kitchen table, her face lit up with pure joy. She ran across the room and threw her arms around Emma's neck. She said she had missed her. She asked if Emma had come back to hear more about flowers. Jack watched his daughter embrace this woman. Something shifted in the air around them. The apartment felt different with 3 people in it. Fuller, warmer, like a home instead of just a place where 2 people slept. Emma stayed until Sophie fell asleep again. Then she thanked Jack and left. But something had changed between them that night. Some wall had come down that could not easily be rebuilt. The next morning, a new photograph appeared on every gossip site in Boston. Emma Whitmore leaving a working-class apartment building at 6 a.m. The headline screamed, "Scandal." Jack's employer called before he had finished his first cup of coffee. He was fired. No suspension this time. No second chances. Before he could process that blow, Sophie's school called. Several parents had complained. They did not want their children associating with the daughter of a man embroiled in public scandal. The principal suggested, in careful bureaucratic language, that Jack might consider finding alternative educational arrangements for Sophie. Jack hung up the phone and stared at the wall of his apartment. His life was unraveling thread by thread. Everything he had built since Sarah's death was collapsing because he had done the right thing. Because he had saved a woman's life and refused to pretend it had never happened. Because he had offered tea to someone who needed a friend. When Emma came to see him that afternoon, he did not let her inside. He spoke through the intercom, his voice flat with exhaustion and defeat. He told her that her presence in his life had destroyed everything. He did not blame her. He understood that none of this was intentional, but he needed her to stay away. He needed to salvage whatever he could of his family's future. Through the speaker, he heard her crying. She promised to fix everything. She swore she would make things right. She begged him to give her one more chance. Jack did not respond. He stood at the window and watched as she walked slowly back to her car, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Part of him wanted to run outside and comfort her. Part of him was relieved to see her go. He did not know which part was right. He was not sure he ever would. Emma did not accept defeat. She had learned from her father that problems required solutions, not surrender. The photographs had come from somewhere. Someone was watching her. She hired a private investigator. Within 3 days, he had traced the source of the photographs. The cameras had been installed by operatives working for Richard. Her uncle had been monitoring her movements for weeks. The tabloid scandal was not bad luck. It was a calculated attack. Emma could have exposed him immediately. She could have called the police, filed criminal charges, but she chose a different path. She called a press conference. Reporters gathered expecting a scandal, anticipating denials or accusations or tearful apologies. Instead, Emma told them about Jack Brennan. She explained how he had saved her life with nothing but his training and his courage, how he had refused every offer of payment, rejected every gesture of gratitude that might compromise his integrity. She described him as the most decent and honorable person she had ever met, a man who wanted nothing from anyone, a man who simply did what was right because it was right. Then she announced the creation of a new charitable foundation. The Elizabeth Whitmore Family Fund, named after her mother, would provide support for single parents struggling to make ends meet, job training programs, emergency financial assistance, educational resources for children. It would honor the memory of a woman who had raised Emma alone for the first 5 years of her life before circumstances changed and she met the man who would become Emma's father. She did not mention Richard. She did not discuss the corporate battle threatening to consume her company. She simply told the truth about one man's extraordinary kindness and pledged to pay that kindness forward into the world. Jack watched the press conference from his apartment, with Sophie sitting beside him on the couch. She was eating cereal and asking questions he could barely answer. Sophie wanted to know if Emma was talking about him. He said yes. Sophie wanted to know if Emma was sad. He said probably yes. Sophie wanted to know if they would see Emma again. Jack did not answer. He did not trust his voice, but as he watched Emma stand before the cameras defending him to the world, asking for nothing in return, something broke loose inside his chest. This was not manipulation. This was simply a woman who cared about someone and was willing to fight for them. He realized that he cared about her too. Richard's surveillance operation collapsed within days of Emma's press conference. Board members began asking uncomfortable questions. Internal investigations revealed a pattern of illegal monitoring that extended far beyond Emma. Within a week, Richard was forced to resign from Whitmore Enterprises. Everyone in Boston knew the truth. He had overreached, and his ambition had destroyed him. Emma secured her position as CEO with a unanimous vote of confidence from the board, but she did not stay to celebrate. As soon as the meeting ended, she got in her car and drove to Dorchester. Jack saw her pull up from his window. He watched her step out into the steady rain that had been falling all day. She did not move toward the building or call his phone. She simply stood there on the sidewalk, looking up at his window, waiting. He put on his jacket and went outside. She told him she was not there to ask for anything. She did not expect forgiveness. She understood if he never wanted to see her again. She just wanted to know if there was any chance she could be part of Sophie's life. And maybe, someday, if he could find it in himself to try again, part of his. Jack looked at this woman standing in the rain. Her designer clothes were soaked through. Her carefully styled hair hung in wet ropes around her face. She looked nothing like a billionaire. She looked like someone who had finally run out of walls to hide behind. Before he could respond, the apartment door burst open behind him. Sophie came running out in her pajamas, ignoring the rain. She grabbed Emma's hand and started pulling her toward the building. Sophie announced that she had a new drawing to show Emma. 3 people this time. A man and a little girl and a woman with brown hair, standing in front of a house with flowers growing in the garden. Emma looked at the drawing through her tears. She told Sophie it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Jack stood in the doorway, watching his daughter lead Emma into their home. For the first time since Sarah's death, the apartment felt complete. He had spent 4 years telling himself that 2 people were enough, that Sophie did not need another mother figure, that he did not need anyone but his daughter. He had been wrong about all of it. 6 months later, Jack stood in front of a conference room at Whitmore Enterprises headquarters, demonstrating proper CPR technique to a group of new employees. He was no longer driving cars through the night. He had applied for a position coordinating the company's emergency response training program, and his decade of experience as a firefighter had made him the perfect candidate. He earned the job through a formal interview process, competing against other qualified applicants, proving himself on his own merits. Sophie had started at a new school in a safer neighborhood, not an expensive private academy filled with children of privilege, just a good public school with dedicated teachers and proper resources. She made friends quickly. She still talked about her mother sometimes, still asked questions that Jack did not always know how to answer. But the sadness in her voice had softened. She was learning that losing someone did not mean losing the capacity to love. Emma did not move in with them. That decision would come later, if it came at all. But she visited every Thursday evening for dinner. She helped Sophie with her homework. She learned to cook simple meals in Jack's tiny kitchen, burning the rice and laughing at herself when the smoke alarm went off. She was learning to be part of something smaller than a corporate empire, something that mattered in ways that balance sheets could never measure. On a quiet evening in late October, after Sophie had gone to bed, Jack and Emma sat together on the small balcony outside his apartment. The city lights sparkled in the distance. Somewhere below, car horns honked and a dog barked, and life continued its ordinary rhythms all around them. Emma asked if he ever regretted that February night. He could have simply called 911 and waited. He did not have to risk himself to save her. Jack considered the question for a long moment. The city hummed beneath them, millions of lives intersecting and separating and intersecting again. He told her he had no regrets. But he had not saved her because of who she was. He had saved her because she was dying, and he knew how to help. It was simply the right thing to do. Emma smiled at that answer. Then she asked about the kiss, the one that had brought her back to life. Jack turned to look at her. For the first time, he reached across the space between them and took her hand in his. Her fingers were warm despite the autumn chill. He told her that kiss was CPR, emergency medicine, nothing more. Then he leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and pressed his lips against hers, gentle and unhurried. Not to save her life this time. Simply because he wanted to. Because she was here, and he was here, and somehow, against all odds, they had found each other. Inside the apartment, Sophie shifted in her sleep and smiled at whatever dream was playing behind her eyes. Above her bed hung her latest drawing, the one she had worked on for 3 days to get exactly right. Three figures standing together in front of a house. A father, a daughter, and a woman with brown hair. A family, complete at last. Some kisses save lives, others start new ones. Jack Brennan had given both kinds to the same woman, and in return, she had given him something he believed he would never have again. A second chance at everything.